afternoon, and thanks for watching THV 11 News at noon. I'm Mackailyn Johnson. Michael Aaron has the day off. Meteorologist Nathan Scott, how are you doing today?
Good afternoon, Mackailyn. Welcome to the Anchor Desk and welcome to Arkansas.
Thank you so much. First day alone on the job. It's doing good, at least at the Anchor Desk. It's
I'm sure you'll do great.
Thank you so much. But it's been cold. It was cold this morning when I was out there. Is there any relief on the way?
We have a mixture of sunny clouds out there, and a cold front is making its way through the state right now. That's picking up the winds quite a bit, but look at the visible satellite. A mixture of sunny clouds primarily to the north and east of the metro. Temperatures, wide variety. 33 right now in Harrison, 46 in Russellville, but into the low 50s down into South Arkansas. Now, take a look at the winds. They are picking up from the north-northwest at about 20 to as high as 30 miles per hour. So there's going to be some gusts out there. It only feels like 23 thanks to that biting breeze in North Arkansas. And this wind will continue to build its way down to the south through the course of the day. So the temperatures probably not rising much more than what we're at right now for many spots. I think from Little Rock down to the south, you'll top out to the low to mid 50s, probably staying to the 40s where the clouds are off to the north and east. But look at what I'm expecting tonight. It's going to be a cold start to your Saturday. Temperatures dipping down to the upper teens to low 20s, but we do have a warming trend going to the weekend. I'll have more on that later.
We're seeing positive signs in the latest COVID numbers, but state leaders say it's still not time to celebrate. First, when we look at cases, we're seeing a decline towards the end of the week, something we haven't said since before Christmas. The last 3 days, we've seen the daily cases go down. And with this drop in daily cases comes a drop in active cases. At just under 80,000, we've seen a 20% drop since last Saturday. But as we told you before, we need to see these case numbers drop consistently before hospitals will get relief. Right now, there are just 25 ICU beds available across the state. The Omicron variant continues to change the game. Throughout the pandemic, monoclonal antibody treatments worked well to help vulnerable people fight off COVID-19. This week, the FDA announced they are limiting the use of at least 2 of those treatments, but there is hope. Dr. Naveen Patel with the Arkansas Department of Health says antibody infusion treatments from Regeneron and Eli Lilly are being limited. He also says almost 100% of the circulating viruses here in the U.S. are suspected to be Omicron. Doctors at UAMS say they still use the drug known as sotrovimab on patients with mild cases in the hospital's infusion center.
It works on Omicron just as well as it worked on Delta, just as well as it worked on Alpha and the other variants.
ADH says other drugs like Paxlovid are effective too. The only issue is the supply doesn't meet the demand. Because of that, some pharmacies and hospitals' main priority when it comes to giving the treatments out are 65 and older and high-risk patients. Moving now to COVID precautions in the classroom, as the Little Rock School Board voted on multiple COVID-related measures late last night. The first 2 are extensions of precautions already in place. The mask mandate will stay in effect throughout the district, and COVID leave for teachers will also continue. Both of these measures will be revisited in 12 weeks. The LRSD board president telling THV 11 now is just not the time to pull back on these precautions.
Now we're right in the middle of this Omicron surge, and it would seem a very strange time to pull back from any of the protections that we have for our staff and our students.
Measures, something new for the district. Directors voted to pass a COVID vaccine incentive for students. Now any student who gets a shot through the school's vaccine clinic will receive $50. Russian troops continue to mass near the Ukrainian border as Russia's foreign minister is now declaring there will be no war. But he warned that Moscow will defend its interest. In a call last night with the president of Ukraine, President Biden reaffirmed America's readiness to respond decisively if Russia does invade. Holly Williams is in Ukraine with the latest update.
A source tells CBS News that on that phone call with President Biden yesterday, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky asked the US to tone down its rhetoric about an imminent invasion. Now that may sound strange because after all, it's Ukraine that has roughly 100,000 Russian troops sitting on its border. But actually the Ukrainian government has consistently been urging calm, seemingly because it knows that panic, people clearing out supermarket shelves, people fleeing the country would be extremely destabilizing. As you can see, things here look very normal. And that's perhaps also because Ukrainians have been living with Russian aggression for years. including a war in eastern Ukraine against Russian-backed separatists. It's claimed more than 14,000 lives, according to the Ukrainian government. But this place, the Maidan, the square that is the symbolic heart of Kyiv, is a reminder of just how fragile Ukraine is, because it's caught in a tug of war between the West and Russia. We were here almost exactly 8 years ago when there were mass protests against the country's then president, who was pro-Russian. Things turned violent, state security forces opened fire, and it ended up with dead bodies on the pavement very close to this spot. Now, different countries have different assessments of what Russia might do, and there's no question that Ukraine perceives the threat. But the Ukrainian government seems to be trying to avoid panicking this country and its roughly 45 million people. Holly Williams, CBS News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
A body found in a reservoir that may belong to a woman missing since October of 2019. That's when 66-year-old Annie Hampton was last seen driving her car in Mariana. The group Adventures with Purpose was searching for her last night and found that very car in Bear Creek Reservoir upside down 29 feet underwater. They called the authorities, who pulled the vehicle from the water early this afternoon. Human remains were found inside and will be identified through an autopsy. The group says our hearts and prayers go out to Annie's family during this difficult time. The volunteers of Adventures with Purpose help conduct underwater searches in connection with unsolved cold cases. They provide this service for free, relying on donations to help make it possible. And a terrifying sight right here in Pittsburgh, where a bridge collapsed this morning, prompting rescuers to rappel nearly 150 feet, while others formed a human chain to help rescue people from a dangling bus. 10 people suffered minor injuries and 3 people were taken to area hospitals, but none of the injuries were life-threatening. The collapse happened hours before President Joe Biden was scheduled to visit the area to speak about infrastructure and other topics. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said on Twitter that the president's trip is still expected to go on as planned. The funeral service for fallen New York City police officer Jason Rivera was held this morning at St. Patrick's Cathedral. The 22-year-old rookie and his partner were killed after responding to a domestic violence call last week. Nationwide, there's been a dramatic rise in the number of police officers killed in the line of duty. Rivera died that night. Mora, who was 27, died 4 days later. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a former police officer, was one of the speakers.
Once a cop is always a cop. It never goes away. Every retired member inside this church and in this city feels the pain.
Last year, gunshots killed 61 officers in the line of duty. Nationwide, a 36% increase from 2020. Next week, many of these mourners will be back for Officer Mora's funeral. The gunman who killed Officers Rivera and Mora was fatally shot by a third officer. The FBI is highlighting the serious impact human trafficking is having on our state. Police, legislators, and victims advocates met in Northwest Arkansas on Wednesday to talk about their efforts in combating the issue in the state. Last year, the FBI opened 1,700 trafficking investigations across the country. That's why the agency says it's so important to partner with local law enforcement.
We can't do this without our local partners, our local agencies working together. This is not something that most communities like to discuss, these type of cases. However, this is not bound by jurisdiction. It's not bound by a city. It's something that spreads across cities and many times across state lines.
Last year, the Western Arkansas Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force investigated 67 child exploitation cases, 3 sex trafficking of a minor investigations, conducted more than 70 search warrants for crimes against children violations, and made 5 arrests through cyber tips. Since the first dispensary opened back in 2019, the medical marijuana industry has boomed here in Arkansas, and now that growth is continuing with a new way for patients to connect with a doctor without even leaving their house. Elevate Holistics is a virtual telehealth company that provides medical.
They're simply people that don't want to go into a revenue office. They don't want to go into a doctor's office. So when you give them this telehealth option, then this is something they may pursue.
2016, they expected there to be about 50,000 people with a card. Well, today, that number is at 80,000. University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff's Chancellor Lawrence B. Alexander is now the chair of the Board for International Food and Agricultural Development. His appointment marks the first time this board is chaired by a leader of a historically black college or university. Now, I had the chance to catch up with the chancellor early this week.
And I'm really looking forward to serving in this very important role.
The role will have a specific effect on food insecurity in developing nations. BIFAD will ensure that USAID utilizes U.S. universities in their mission. To Chancellor Alexander, University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff fits that mold.
We have a number of faculty and staff who are engaged on a daily basis in research and extension work across agriculture in the state of Arkansas.
And he hopes this appointment will expand awareness of the natural state's top industry.
Agriculture is the #1 industry in our state. So I think it's important for our state as well to have someone from Arkansas representing the state as well.
There's plenty of preparation for this new position, but his past 35 years in education and UAPB's efforts in agriculture are what got him here.
That's a very, very significant part, I think, of this kind of appointment, is having a leader of an institution that is so engaged in agriculture and who work at it each day to bring about assistance and relief to farmers.
Chancellor Alexander will remain in his position at UAPB, but there will be times the position will require him to be in D.C. or somewhere internationally. He says helping people around the world alongside the federal government is what he's looking forward to the most.